Hey, welcome back, Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. So with the MCU's multiversal war fast approaching, it has us all wondering how this climactic showdown is going to end up in Avengers Secret Wars, and how Kang the Conqueror was able to win this war the first time around with the help of the Celestials. And then a little later, we're going to discuss how Galactus, the Eater of Worlds, could be the Avengers' secret weapon.
Hey person, what do you mean that Kang was able to win the first time around?
Well, buddy, we have to remember that He Who Remains is a variant of Kang the Conqueror, and that he won the first multiversal war. And it's likely that before taking on the name of He Who Remains, that he too was once known as Kang.
I've been dubbed many names by many people. A ruler, a conqueror.
We think that in order to win the multiversal war and defeat the other Kang variants, He Who Remains must have had some pretty heavy hitters on his side. And once he won the war, he likely would have needed a hand in creating a universe within his new sacred timeline. And that is where the Celestials come in.
Celestials use energy gathered from host planets to create suns for new galaxies to form.
Now, in the Loki series, we learned from He Who Remains that Alioth played a key role in his restructuring of the multiverse, but he never really goes into detail as to where Alioth came from and how he was able to tame this beast and harness its powers.
I harnessed the beast's power and began experimenting on it.
It's a very
somehow Palpatine returned
type of line. Now, it's important to remember that He Who Remains doesn't actually have any superpowers per se. So, beings like the Celestials or Alioth could be the key to his mission of multiversal domination. He Who Remains and all of the Kang variants derive from a scientist named Nathaniel Richards. His brilliance led him to discover the existence of alternate realities, but he doesn't possess any type of superpower that would allow him to manipulate reality like Wanda, or like in the comics, Mr. Fantastic's son, Franklin Richards.
I have children of my own. I understand your pain.
Now, we've seen Wanda in the MCU manipulate reality by creating Westview and by taking away Black Bolt's mouth.
What mouth?
And in the comics, Franklin Richards used his powers to create a brand new multiverse following the events of 2015's Secret Wars. But Kang is a different animal. His powers derive from his genius understanding of technology.
Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
All of Kang's supposed powers, such as time and reality traveling, derive from his own technological creations, such as the time dial that He Who Remains wears on his hand in Loki.
Oh, a swing of a miss.
As well as Kang's time chair that will be seen in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
What about those blue lasers shooting out of his hands? Are those superpowers?
Well, Kang is notorious for his arsenal of advanced weapons. He has hover pads, blasters, and anti-gravity gauntlets, all things that he's created himself. So the same is likely true for those blue energy blasters. Now, with all that being said, it's important to remember that he is still human, and there are literal gods and celestial beings throughout the multiverse that could easily stand in his way. But what if they didn't? What if amidst this multiversal war, it became clear that all of existence was at risk?
Nearly resulted in the total destruction of, well, everything.
What if He Who Remains was able to plead his case to various gods and celestials throughout the multiverse? What if he was able to tap into their own selfish goals of self-preservation?
Every god watches over their own peoples. Nothing more, nothing less.
If He Who Remains explained to the gods and celestials that even they would not be able to survive the war, and if he then presented them with the solution to both end the war and guarantee their survival, it's not hard to imagine a scenario where these gods and celestials sided with this particular Kang, He Who Remains, and then helped him to win the multiversal war. Perhaps they not only helped He Who Remains defeat the other Kangs, but they also could have played a key role in the assembly of this sacred timeline. In the Eternals, we learn the following. In the beginning, before the six singularities, that's referring to the six Infinity Stones, Arishem, the prime celestial, created the first sun and brought light into the universe. Life began and thrived. All was in balance. Now, later in the film, we learned that Arishem and other celestials created galaxies throughout the universe and planted seeds for intelligent life to evolve. So, with Arishem being credited for the initiation of the Big Bang, as well as other celestials working together to create galaxies, suns, and life as we know it, it'd make sense that they'd play a major role in He Who Remains' plan to create the sacred timeline. After all, the sacred timeline is merely a collection of universes stacked on top of one another, running parallel in a circular motion. So, to restructure this multiverse and to create the sacred timeline, it would make sense if He Who Remains instructed each set of celestials to create their own universes. But with one rule: no universe can allow for the existence of any Kang variants. Now, that brings us to Alioth. While the celestials may have played a key role in the creation of the sacred timeline, we know that Alioth is responsible for the consumption and destruction of the universes or timelines that He Who Remains once once erased. But where did Alioth come from, and how did He Who Remains become his master? In Loki, we learned that Alioth was created by the tears in reality caused by the multiversal war. But that's a little vague. Why would tears in reality create this sentient being? Like everything else in the MCU, what if Alioth was created by the Celestials? But in this case, at the request of He Who Remains. The Celestials could have used the energy of colliding universes discovered by He Who Remains to create a beast that could target and consume realities. That same energy could have been later reutilized to create the reset charges and pruning batons that are used by the TVA.
Reset it.
And then Alioth could have then been retired to the Void at the end of time. There, Alioth would be tasked with protecting the Citadel and consuming pruned variants and surviving artifacts.
It's a living tempest that consumes matter and energy. They send entire branched realities here.
Now, the MCU has teetered on the line of intelligent design and natural causes being responsible for the creation of universes. We know things such as evolution and the Big Bang are acknowledged as fact in the MCU. But there's also the mystical side with the existence of gods from all of man's religions, as well as the existence of their respected afterlives. And like we mentioned, the Celestials are credited for the creation of universes and the galaxies and suns within them. So it could be said that our scientific understanding of how things come to be are actually the detailed steps taken by the Celestials to guide creation. So it'd make sense to learn that Alioth was also created by the Celestials, using energy found from tears in time and space caused by the multiversal war. But it's also possible that Alioth had no creator, no designer, and that the beast evolved on its own from incursion-based energy.
An incursion occurs when the boundary between two universes erodes and they collide, destroying one or both entirely.
Perhaps He Who Remains didn't need the help of the gods or Celestials to tame this beast. Maybe he alone was able to use his superior intelligence and understanding of time and space to then capture Alioth and use this beast to win the war. With a creature like Alioth on his side, He Who Remains would have had no trouble defeating his other variants, and the gods and Celestials would have no choice but to bow before him or be erased from existence. And if that's the case, the Celestials would have had no choice but to help He Who Remains create his sacred timeline and defeat his other variants. Not because they wanted to, but because he'd kill them if they didn't. He Who Remains, when partnered with Alioth, would have made every god, every Celestial, and maybe even every Avenger or two bowing before him and doing his bidding.
I said...
Footage from Quantumania shown at D23 revealed that Kang is making Ant-Man do his bidding by holding his daughter hostage. So I'm sure He Who Remains, who is also a Kang, would be happy to use similar tactics. And with He Who Remains still being in possession of Alioth, that means that he can still force the Celestials to do as he says, meaning that the Celestials' mission in the Eternals movie could have been assigned to them by He Who Remains. And when Ereshkigal says,
"Without us, our universe will fall into darkness. All life will die."
that could be him alluding to the fact that He Who Remains will prune their entire universe if they don't obey.
But person, do you really think that every god and celestial is just gonna bow to He Who Remains? Wouldn't some of them fight back?
Good question, buddy, and that brings me to our next theory. When talking about giant robot space gods and cloud monsters that can eat entire worlds, Galactus tends to come to mind.
And you are neither audacious nor rebellious, but simply mad.
In the MCU, it is likely that Galactus will be categorized as a Celestial. Now, the reason we may have yet to meet Galactus in the MCU is because, up until now, he hasn't existed. What if Galactus was one of the Celestials that refused to bow before He Who Remains? Now, this could have resulted with Galactus going toe-to-toe with He Who Remains, Alioth, and all the other Celestials who sided with He Who Remains. And after putting up a good fight, it's likely that He Who Remains would prevail, and Galactus would be wiped from existence and not included as part of the new sacred timeline. This could mean that not only does the TVA prune timelines to prevent variants of Kang from coming into being, they could also be pruning timelines to prevent Galactus from coming into being. But now, with the sacred timeline in shambles and the multiverse free to expand, Galactus can come back.
I'm back!
Galactus was in the original 1984 Secret Wars, and he has beef with both Dr. Doom and the Beyonder. Dr. Doom was essentially the main villain antagonist of Secret Wars, and the Beyonder was a being who sent both the heroes and the villains to Battleworld.
Or what's the Battleworld?
Well, Battleworld is the planet that's made up of various pieces of other worlds from throughout the multiverse. It's been theorized that the MCU's Secret Wars could see Kang replace both the Beyonder and Dr. Doom as the main antagonist and the creator of Battleworld. So imagine how awesome it'd be to see Galactus show up in Secret Wars on Battleworld, ready to exact revenge on the guy who wiped him from existence.
Seeing Kang get eaten by Galactus would be one of the best scenes in any comic book movie ever. Even better than this one.
Heck yeah, I would. High five. So let me know what you think. Do you think He Who Remains had the help of the Celestials when he created the Sacred Timeline? Do you think the Galactus was wiped from existence during the Multiversal War? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or add us on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.